Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Aladdin. I make videos and host live streams talking about Islam, leaving Islam, and life after Islam, and other related topics. And today I'm joined by Secular Spirit, aka Alim. Alim also makes similar videos, except I'll let him introduce himself. Take it away.
Hey everybody, it's great to be back on your channel, Aladdin. It's been long overdue. And yeah, I mean, we had a lot of similarities in our motivations for talking about Islam. And I think both of us just wanted to come at it from a place of more empathy and understanding with not just the issues that ex-Muslims face, but the issues that Muslims face because of the religion. And this is something I talk about often, how Muslims are actually the biggest victims of Islam, even when they are causing so much harm to ex-Muslims and others around the world. So yeah, that's what my channel is mostly about, but I also talk about spirituality and organized religion in general, and talk about how we can have a meaningful life beyond organized religion.
Yeah, that's a great introduction.
Thank
And
you.
you recently, you live streamed, I think, like a
It,
week
wa- it
ago
wasn't
now.
a live stream,
Oh, okay.
but yeah, please continue.
Yeah, you recorded, sorry, because I haven't watched it yet, and I'm guilty of that because it is 3 hours long. But you did record a video where you talked about why you left Islam, and fair enough. It's never going to be as short, as a 10-minute video or something. That short. You don't want to miss any of the details, I bet. And today, I suppose I want to talk about some aspects of that story, maybe part of mine, and also answer the question, why haven't I made a video called Why I Left Islam? And whether I'm ever going to make such a video, I don't know. So we'll find out by the end of this conversation, I suppose. And also, it's worth mentioning that we'll be taking comments and questions. So periodically, we'll pause and read some of the live chat. So if you're here, if you want to participate, leave a comment, leave a live chat. We love audience participation. If you're watching this after the fact, just tune in next Wednesday. I have a live stream every Wednesday. And yeah, hopefully we'll do more of these together.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so where do you want to begin?
Well, I mean, you mentioned that it's nearly 3 hours long. That's true. I think you left a link for the full video in the video description, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, yes.
So yeah, the idea was to just have something that's like a comprehensive full story, just in case anyone who doesn't know about me or anyone just stumbles upon my stories or is looking for similar stories to their experiences of leaving a religion, whether it's Islam or Christianity or whatever, can find it and can watch as much as they want. I try to go as long as Return of the King, the last Lord of the Rings movie. I couldn't quite make it past the 3 hour point, but I got close.
Yeah, I didn't watch that either, so maybe I'll do a marathon. 6 hours.
I'd recommend
Yeah.
watching that one before my video.
Okay.
I'd say the same thing to anyone watching as well.
Yeah. But no, you're doing yourself a disservice there. Go watch this video if you want to kill some time. Have it in the background, that kind of thing. Yeah, I guess I'll start by telling you about why I don't have one of those videos, and I am
Sure.
reluctant to, because the answer to the question, why did you leave Islam, when that's directed at me, it's because it has not been proven true, and it's safe to assume that it is not true. So the reason I'm not a Muslim is because it is not believable to me. That's as simple as that. Of course, I could talk about how I got here. That's a whole different answer, but I don't like to sort of justify my leaving. That when people say, "Why did you leave Islam?" I don't want to feel like I have to give them my whole life story to then qualify to leave Islam. I left Islam because I don't believe in it. That's as simple as they should require the answer to be. Now, I'm thinking, I suppose, about an adversarial voice that will be nitpicking my story about why I left, and I guess that's where I'm coming at it from. But I understand that there's value to other people who are curious to know, how was my life with Islam before I realized that I don't believe, or before I finally accepted that I don't believe anymore. And that is difficult to cram into just one video. I mean, I'm sure, as you have discovered, 3 hours is how long it took you. I worry it would take me even longer than that. And in a sense, I feel like everything I do on my channel, if I'm talking about an experience that I've had, or if I'm talking about a topic that I relate to, I mention a lot of my story in it. So, I have a video about my fear of hell. I have another video about, how my life went in terms of sex and religion. So it feels more beneficial for me to focus on a part of my story that I want to talk about than to just dump it all somewhere and tell people to, go figure out, which part resonates the most with you, or which part you think is the reason that I left Islam. Because I don't think that any of those are really reasons why I left. They're just parts of the story of how I got to this point. So I hope that answers the question, but I'm happy to answer any questions about, parts of my life that have to do with Islam. Yeah. What do you think about all that I
I
said?
I think what you're saying totally makes sense. You obviously can't really distill the full thing even in a 3-hour video. And I'd only say that I think it's good to give people options. So for people who want to just go into the weeds, go in depth on specific things like the fear of hell, the fear of judgment day, which are things I talked about in my video, you can have those separate videos. But maybe some people do want to have just that long form kind of thing to listen to and experience. So I would say if you have the chance to do it, the time to do it down the road, I highly encourage you. If anything, I would say for me, it was kind of cathartic to just let it all out there. It was emotionally exhausting. And the best part, I think, from the whole thing for me, and we're going to get into it later on, I guess, is how many of the comments from people showed that while I felt so alone in these experiences, my whole teenage years, my young adulthood, there were a lot of people who went through a lot of the same exact experiences, including my never nude phase, where I guess we can talk about that in a little bit too, where I was afraid and embarrassed about being naked before God, because as most Muslims are raised to believe, God is watching you at all times, including when you're taking a shower alone in in the bathroom.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about that for a bit.
You want to start with that one?
Sure. Why not? I mean, that's the reality of it. That was one of the first parts of your video. There was something that obviously happened to you at a young age. So yeah, I mean, let's think about it. The part that when you mention nudity and God, what comes to mind to me is the day of judgment, when everyone will be summoned and everyone will be naked and kind of, put on a platform essentially. I don't
You're
know if it's literal, but
exposed.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're exposed to the world, and we're supposed to not care about seeing each other naked because everyone's so stressed out about, the day of judgment
Oh,
that
it
no one
sounds so
really
lovely,
cares.
doesn't it?
Yeah. And even if you've done a lot of good deeds, you're still stressed out because you don't know it could go either way. But the point is that you're going to be naked in front of God and everyone, and all of your sins and deeds and, good deeds and bad deeds exposed. So that was my first encounter with the idea of God and nudity. How was it for you? How did that idea get into your head?
I really don't know. And it's one of those things where I don't really remember why or how it started. It's almost like the idea just came in my head of, so to just back up a bit for those of you who might not be familiar. So what I was taught was God is watching you at all times. Of course, he loves you as he's doing this. And there's also these two angels that watch you at all times and record your deeds. So I can't remember their specific names right now, but one of them watches you and records your good deeds, logs them, and then the other angel does the same thing for your bad deeds and logs them. And the whole idea is that if you have more bad deeds than good, according to whatever calculus or equation goes on there, it determines whether you're going to hell or heaven. And so I was just this little kid, and when you're young, I would have been 8 or 9 or something like that. When you're taught these things, you believe they're real. You believe that God is watching you, these angels are watching you, they're all around you. And so that's how I felt. I felt like they're watching me at all times, and I just felt embarrassment. I felt like the same exact feeling as if you're, I don't know, in a public bathroom or something, and a stranger walks in on you naked. It felt the same thing to me in my mind, even though it was invisible beings like angels and God.
Yeah. I I hear you that the image of the two angels is kind of stuck in my head. I can't remember if there was a sort of delineation where one writes your good deeds, one writes your bad deeds. I'm not sure of that detail, but I remember that there were two of them, and I remember the names from the verse Raqibun Atid, but
Yes,
it
yeah, that's
wasn't
what it
that
was. Yeah.
one of them was called Raqib, the other was called Atid, which is also confusing. But anyway, yeah, I remember that, and it's kind of it's very it makes you feel naked all the time, in a sense that all of your thoughts are being written down, good or bad. Um, or all of your deeds and thoughts that you have no privacy from God or his angels that are, writing everything down. So
Well,
you
well,
were
the
thinking about
the
them, yeah?
yeah, well, the interesting thing there is that according to the Islamic mentality, that's actually a good thing for kids to believe because then, when the parents aren't around or, no authority figures are around, it keeps the children in check. So, I mean, obviously Muslims believe it to be true, but that's one of the advantages of it,
Mhm.
right? That you almost have this internal policeman monitoring you at all times, making sure you don't do the naughty things.
Right. But it wasn't a good thing for you, you're saying?
No, no. I mean, I think it just comes down to if you really think about it, what would 24/7 surveillance feel like? Let's just exclude God or angels or whatever, but imagine if the government was doing it, or the various big evil corporations were doing it. You would feel self-conscious. You wouldn't be able to really be yourself. The whole notion of who yourself is would be forever distorted because you're used to be constantly watched. And yet somehow, because it's God and God loves us and has a plan for us and He created us, it's all okay, except for the fact that you're going to be judged on where you're going to spend the afterlife, eternity, uh, based on this assessment of you, this constant monitoring. So
Mhm.
stressful, anxiety inducing. And I guess for me in particular, it manifested in this warped way. And I'm not the only one, apparently, because others have since come out and said they went through the same thing. It came out in this way of shame and embarrassment about my nudity.
Right. It's sometimes it's frustrating when we talk about the effect that a certain belief has had on you, even when it's just self-imposed. Some believers will say, "Well, I believe the same thing, and it didn't affect me, or it doesn't bother me at all." And I don't think they realize that people think differently. And for someone who's more, say, visually creative or more imaginative, might actually imagine that God is a presence in the room with them, while someone's more forgetful, who doesn't really pay attention to these things, might not think about it twice. So just because it didn't affect you doesn't mean that it's not a belief that could affect a percentage of people out there and is affecting a percentage of people out
Exactly.
there.
And some people have body image issues, for example, and I guess to some extent I must have had that at that time as well. So that factors into it. Not everybody has body image issues,
Right.
so got to factor that in as well.
I also
Mm.
want to add, echo an experience here that I know people who've also been through this, where um, some people believe that jinn, especially if you're a woman, jinn might be able to check you out in the shower, or jinn, they can see you all the time. So you're supposed to shower with some clothes on. And not all Muslims believe this, but I know at least a couple, aside from the commenter, who were taught something like that. So women have to hide even in the shower.
I didn't know that specifically, but I did know that jinn, which are how would you even explain what they are? I was struggling to the way it was explained to me was that they're these beings that are invisible. They kind of exist in this alternate plane, maybe you could say, but they're just like us. They can interfere in our lives and possess us. So the thing I learned was that if you're a really attractive woman and you wear too many revealing clothes, a jinn might, lust after you or fall in love with you and start messing with you.
Right.
So you have that to worry about as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I could go on a tangent about jinn. Um, but you're saying that your anxiety about God always watching and the angels got you to feel self-conscious about your body.
Yeah.
And how did that progress, or how did it change, and how did it go away eventually?
Well, I'll get to that in a second. I just wanted to add, that some Muslims might say, why would God? This is the part of me where I realize how much my perception of reality or just my logic was warped. I'm a little kid, and this is the thing to remember, that hundreds of millions of little kids are learning this stuff. First of all, why would God care? Like, why would God be interested in seeing me naked or not? He's my creator after all. And also, I remember doing things like covering myself with like a towel while I changed out of my underwear, so God couldn't sneak a peek. I think if God wanted to sneak a peek, he could at any time. So in that sense, it didn't make sense, but to me, it felt like something I had to do. So yeah, very irrational, and I completely acknowledge that. But that's what my 9-year-old, 8-year-old self believed. And to answer your question, I think I just stopped doing it for whatever reason. Probably just got tired of doing it, honestly. And maybe you could say it's one of those things where I just became more comfortable with my body, and also maybe not being as childish when it comes to those things. I know that's a loaded word, childish, but maybe it is a similar thing to, well, because like you were saying earlier, maybe because it wasn't in my immediate reality as much, I kind of just forgot about it.
Right. Well, whatever the reason is, I'm glad that you did. I can't imagine
Or
that's
do I
easy to.
still do it? Dun,
I
dun,
mean,
dun.
I have never seen you naked, so who knows? As far as I know, maybe that's still a thing. Um, you know, we joke, but there is a version of that still remains with Muslim women to some extent, to varying extents. That when a woman is supposed to pray, even if she's at home by herself, not in front of anyone, she still has to dress in the way that Allah wants her to dress. Even if she doesn't wear the hijab outside of the house, she has to wear a hijab and cover up, as if, because she's in the presence of God in that moment, even though God is always seeing her anyway. But in that moment, it would be disrespectful to have her hair down, or like not be covering up her arms and her legs and everything and her entire body. But why? If by the same logic that you got out of it, that God shouldn't care about me getting naked, or God shouldn't care about looking at my body, God also shouldn't care about what a woman looks like while she's praying to him. I mean, the excuse that we hear about the hijab being for societal benefit, so that men don't check out women, all that kind of stuff, that's all, one thing. The other would be that God, the way that God sees you, also matters. So you're kind of naked in front of Allah if you don't have your hair covered while you're praying. And that's not something that you grow out of. That's something that they're supposed to keep doing, till they die. So I don't know. I saw a parallel there.
I definitely can see that. And I think it reveals a few things, about how ultimately Allah is this ultimate, parental male authority figure. So, in a weird way, it actually exposes how there is this sexualized component to Allah. Because if you think about it, like you said, like it shouldn't matter, and yet it does. So I think it just ties in again to this whole societal control thing where the way Islam works, even if women are completely alone, they want to still have that dominant male patriarchal figure dominating them.
I don't know if they want to, but that's what the belief is. Um, yeah. But you're out of that phase, thankfully.
Yep.
You can, yeah, you can enjoy the freedom to change your clothes without a towel. So I'm happy for you there.
Small improvements in life, yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering maybe if we could talk also about, because you mentioned it earlier, like the whole fear of hell and day of judgment
Hmm.
uh, phase. So for me, that is something that for years, and this is from when I was first taught about it, I'd say like around 12, 11. And yeah, this would be in the curriculum, like in the school I went to in the Middle East in Dubai, teaching little kids about the torments of hell. And so that terrified me and preoccupied me for years and years and years as a teenager, as an adolescent. And I suppose just based on watching your videos, similar for you, right?
Yeah, and I guess I want to put that disclaimer out there, because the title of this live stream will be something along the lines of, why we left Islam or something like that. I want to make this very explicitly clear. I did not leave Islam because I had a fear of hell. and it was weighing on me. And that's why I thought, you know what, to hell with this, pun unintended. I'll just leave it all behind. These are things that I struggled with up until I left. And had I just been able to shed it off when I faced a little bit of difficulty, I would have left Islam when I was a kid. But I didn't even know there was an option to leave Islam when I was a kid. So I've been a Muslim kind of against my own will for longer than I can remember, because I didn't realize there was any other way. But yeah, I struggled with the fear of hell from a very young age. And even, it made me feel guilty about the things that I did. And even when I didn't do anything, I felt like I deserved it. I just didn't figure out why yet. And yeah, it took a long time to get over that.
I think the image that really stuck with me, I mean, beyond all the stuff that they teach about what will happen on the day of judgment and the punishments of hell, well, specifically one punishment that really stuck with me, and this is in the Quran itself, and I talk about in my video, is the whole idea that your skin will just burn and melt off, and then be replaced with fresh skins over and over and over again. And this is the punishment for the disbelievers. And that was something that horrified me, even though I felt, well, I'm still a Muslim, so I'm not a disbeliever. So even if I sinned a lot and went to hell, I hope that doesn't happen to me, but I wasn't sure. So I was worried that something like that would happen to me. But beyond that, the thing that really stuck with me is something I have to admit I've never really come across it anywhere else, but it was something that was taught to me in my Islamic education class in school. And it was basically this idea that once the day of judgment has happened and the souls are brought up for their judgment, there's a bridge that you cross to get to paradise. I don't know if you've ever heard this before. So there's this bridge, and if you're let's say you're like the perfect Muslim, and you've done everything right, you haven't sinned in your life, you will sprint effortlessly across this bridge and enter paradise, and happily ever after. But
Oh,
if
and the bridge is as thin as a hair, if I remember correctly.
I don't remember that, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
And basically, if you're, let's say, a typical Muslim, run-of-the-mill Muslim, you've definitely sinned, you've done bad things. What happens is the bridge will just become transparent, and you'll fall through it, and you'll fall down into the pits of Jahannam, hell. And the idea was that you'll get punished for a while based on how much sin you did, to, I guess, cleanse you before you go to paradise. And there was something so awful in my mind of that happening. And remember, again, to anyone watching, these are things that are being taught to like 12-year-olds. So my feeling was, just how awful it would feel to just be running or trying to cross this bridge, and then it disappears, and you know exactly what that means and the kind of suffering that's awaiting you. And that was something that really, really terrified me.
And I gotta say that it's easy for someone to point out in the comments or in the chat. Actually, that's not when they go to hell. They go to hell at a different stage in the Day of Judgment. The lore is so inconsistent that there's so many different ways that you can end up in hell. There's even that in your grave, if you are that bad of a sinner, you might be tortured in the grave or get a preview of hell. Some say you get a window into your place into hell or heaven. But then that makes the whole Judgment Day kind of redundant, because if you already know where you're going to go, how are you supposed to stand in front of Allah and then be surprised by your judgment all over again? Anyway, the whole thing is very inconsistent. But when you're a kid, most of the time you're not thinking about how this inconsistency points to how it's all BS. You're usually thinking, oh, that's another detail that I should be afraid of. And like, for example, that what you just described, that bridge, I remember a detail being that it's as thin or as sharp as like a hair or the edge of a sword or something like that. And that I think this is supposed to be a Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path, and that some people will run over it like the wind, and some people will, trip and fall off of it. And just think of how sadistic that is.
I
So
didn't know that detail. Oh my God, that makes it even worse.
I mean, you mentioned, again, don't quote us on this because the lore is very inconsistent, but you mentioned that the bridge would disappear and the person would fall in. Either way, the person thinks that they have a chance of crossing it, that there's a little bit of hope. and God's like, ah, gotcha, you're gonna fall in. Um, why? Like, if the person already has been judged, does God enjoy that last little bit of watching them fall into the fire, or like pushing them himself? It's very primitive and sadistic, I'd
Well,
say.
I think like the clear answer is it's designed to scare you, and it's pretty effective, especially when you're teaching little kids that. And it almost feels like something that would be in one of those Saw movies, like because there is like a sadistic element to it if you really break it down and think about it without that belief in the
Mhm.
all-loving God. And to your just point about the lore being confusing, I like how you use the word lore too, by the way. Uh, is Islam lore. Um, the thing about it too is when I would hear contradictory things, like one thing I was always confused about was, do all Muslims just go to heaven directly? Do some of them spend some time in hell, or do they go directly? I heard conflicting things about that. I just thought that there was something I was missing, that there was information that I just didn't have access to. Like, so the problem was me for not having enough adequate information. But at the same time, when you're a kid and you're being taught these things, very rarely will you find a kid who's like, you know what, I shouldn't trust my father, or I shouldn't trust my madrasa teacher about this. I should look into alternative sources. There aren't many 10, 12 year olds who have that ability to critically think at that level. You just believe what you're
Yeah.
told.
And you know what? Even I remember having questions since I was as young as 10 years old. Questions that were critical thinking, were signs of maybe indications that I am capable of critical thought. But the answer would shut it down so fast that it doesn't really help it flourish. So even people, there are people that I've met who told me, whether it was Islam, Christianity, or something else, by a very young age, they realized, oh, it doesn't make any sense. And they knew enough or had enough confidence to think this is the end of the line. I don't believe. Let me just continue my life now. But for a lot of us, there's still that lack of confidence in your own opinions and in your
Exactly.
thoughts. And especially when Islam tells you you're nothing, you're tiny, your brain is so weak and pathetic compared to God's. Don't be arrogant. Don't come to any conclusions that aren't what everyone else believes or what God says that you're supposed to believe. So it's no surprise that a lot of us, even if we had the right questions, we heard the wrong answers and we were kind of pushed into silence, even if not explicitly, aggressively or anything. It's just the peer pressure, I guess, and the societal conditioning. Yeah, man, time flies when you're having fun. Um, when did you first? When do you remember, like, what age or how long ago did you feel like you're no longer afraid of hell whatsoever?
It would be when I left Islam, so much later when I was 18. Basically, when I stopped believing that it was real. As long as I was Muslim and I believed it was real, it was something that kept me afraid, and that kept me feeling guilty. And that was especially true once I hit puberty and I started having, as Muslims would describe it, unclean, sinful thoughts about women, and having, desires that were not supposed to be done by a young Muslim man, and acting on those desires. I think you know in which way I'm talking about. So, like something like masturbation, for example. I know that there's some variations on how Muslims are taught about masturbation. So, some, I don't know if you'd call them schools of thought, but I've heard some sheikh saying that it's not actually a sin as long as you're not, for example, watching pornography as you do it, as long as you're not harming anyone else. And then there were others, and this is what I was taught as a Muslim, where it was just a sin. Touching yourself was a sin. And so I definitely had a lot of guilt about that. I had a lot of guilt about feeling desire towards, let's say, female teachers in my school, or, like women in movies I'd be watching. And that definitely amplified my fear of hell, because I felt like I was sinning constantly when the day of judgment could happen at any time.
Mhm. Um, I think my fear of hell remained for a long time because I didn't officially really leave Islam or face all my doubts till, not that long ago, maybe like 5, 6 years ago at most now. And it was only then that my fear of hell dissolved when I realized that not only do I not believe and have not believed for a while, but I have no reason to be worried. When I dug in, the deeper I dug in, the more I thought, wait, that's it? And I kind of got angry at myself almost like, why did you let this fool you for so long? This is actually the more you read about it, the sillier the lore gets. And the more you read about what the most learned people say, the more you kick yourself in a sense for not learning this sooner and leaving sooner. But obviously, everything needs its time, and you can't just regret not having left sooner. Things happen the way that they happen. So I was just glad that I finally left. But ever since then, I haven't had an inkling of fear whatsoever that, what if Islam is true? What if I'm going to hell? Um, it's been a while that it doesn't even cross my mind as a possibility. I mean, I still feel guilt. I still feel a lot of other feelings that are associated with how I used to feel when I was a believer, but not for the same reasons, and not the fear that, what if all of this plot is real and I'm going to hell forever? It is beyond possible in my mind. Like not even a thing.
I can relate to that feeling of anger with myself for like, how could I be so stupid? And it still happens to me sometimes, I suppose, when I just remember things I used to say or do when I was Muslim. Uh, I think the thing that was a really good switch in my mentality towards, the doubt, the uncertainty, what if there is a hell or not, is something that I just heard from I couldn't tell you the specific name, but from one of the popular atheist public speakers, content creators. And their point basically was, what about all the other things that could possibly exist? The I don't know if this is just like a spitballing example, but the hell in ancient Egyptian religion or Norse mythology, so on and so forth. You're not worried about these other hells, and you're not worried about all these other things that could hypothetically exist. So what's the point in worrying about this thing? You could worry about all sorts of things. And I think once I looked at it that way, I think it really again showed how, I wouldn't use the word silly necessarily, but how it was a waste of my energy to fear those kinds of things, because you could just fear any kind of hypothetical thing that you can't imagine, like that you can't actually see or experience tangibly.
Mhm. I remember trying to pose this analogy to someone. There's a chance right now that there is some kind of spy or agent, government agent that is spying on you in particular out there. Uh, the chance is very, very slim, but it is something that's within the realm of possibility that we've seen happen before. But you don't live your life. Hopefully, you don't live your life in fear of such a possibility. And I'm not saying that you should, but if you, even the things that are possible that could happen, a volcano could explode, erupt, and cause a an ash cloud so large that it could disrupt a bunch of people's lives. All of that stuff could happen at any moment, and we have precedent for it happening. But we understand on some level that you can't just live life stressing about everything that could happen.
Or you'd
Now,
never leave
add
your
to that,
bed.
yeah, you'll never drive a car, you'll never get in a car or any sort of form of transportation, because that's a risk right there. And all of these are real possibilities. Now add to that every fantastical realm of punishment and afterlife and metaphysical stuff. You can't account for all of that stuff, and you're not. You're only accounting for the one that you have been indoctrinated into, and that's not fair. Either you have to be afraid of all of these things or none of them. And obviously, I'm advocating for you to not be afraid of any of these things. Yeah.
Very well said. Yeah. I think just to add to that, I think one of the things that really helped me towards my decision to finally leave Islam, to realize, what, I don't believe this anymore, was when I moved to Canada from the Middle East when I was 17. And this was to go to university. And I went from a place where most people were Muslim. Anyway, most people I interacted with were Muslim. I did know some Christians, and I believed, well, they believe in the same God. So in that sense, they weren't that far off. But once I came to Canada and I saw all these people that belong to all sorts of different religions, and a lot of people who were just non-religious, having that difference in belief opened my mind to other perspectives, and to realize, okay, well, maybe this isn't the one thing. There's all these people leading meaningful lives who don't believe in Islam. What does that mean?
Mhm. I mean, it's one thing to know of their existence, and it's another to witness their existence all the time. Um, I mean, you and I, even when we lived in the Middle East, we knew of the existence of non-Muslims all around the world. We even probably watched, the movies where non-Muslims were acting. We can see, physical evidence of them. But it's different than actually living among them or witnessing them in your society. And yeah, I speak for myself when I say in Saudi Arabia, most people were Muslim and there existed non-Muslims every now and then, but the chances were that most people I knew, whether they practiced, religiously or not, were at least they had a shot at going to heaven, or by default, hopefully they're going to heaven is what I used to think. But when I realized, and that's just the bias in me, like you, that I live in a world not just with the Muslims that I grew up around, but with everyone else on earth, I realized that most of humanity is going to hell. And, Islam confirms that in multiple spots where it's kind of almost predicted. God knows that most people are going to hell. And that again got me questioning, what's the point of all of this? What a failure on God's part that even if Islam eventually becomes the most popular religion, even if somehow every person on earth becomes a Muslim, somehow, what about all those generations of people who didn't up until that point? And, how can I make the world a place where everyone's a Muslim so we all get an equal shot at going to heaven? And then when I started looking at how do I promote the religion, what do I tell people they should join for except so you don't go to hell? I found that there's nothing that actually proves it. There's all sorts of points about how it helped me or it could help you, or like other people say that they helped them, but there's nothing unique or uniquely truthful about Islam in the pitch except the kalam argument and all sorts of things about how the world needs a god and that kind of thing.
This couldn't have all come from nothing.
Yeah, man, I hate that. I hate that statement. Because that's not really the assertion that you're making when you say, I don't believe what you're saying about the world. You're not saying, and therefore everything came from nothing. I don't think anyone's really saying that. Are you?
No.
Yeah. A common question that I get sometimes is, well, what do you believe in? Do you just believe in nothing? How do you answer that?
Yeah, I get that one all the time when I do mention that I'm an atheist. Um, I answer that by saying, I believe in a lot of the things that matter to you, that matter to me. Uh, you know, the well-being of others, trying to make the world a better place, trying to find fulfillment through those things, the things that I value. And of course, then the question is, well, if you're just going to die and everything's going to stop existing, uh, why bother at all? And there's like a really good, I haven't used this with anyone, but I always think about this really good way of looking at it that Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience fame, an atheist in the US, said that just because you have a car and the car is eventually going to break down in 10 years and you're going to have to sell it, or it's going to become a scrap, that doesn't mean that you don't get benefit from the car in those 10, 15 years. So just because we might cease to exist, or it seems, as far as I can tell, that we'll just cease to exist, that doesn't mean that the things we do now don't have value. I would say, if anything, that actually adds to the value of the things we have, because this is all we've got.
Yeah. It's like I gave the analogy before of a pen. If this pen is not refillable and at the end it runs out, does that mean that it was not useful for the
There you go.
period?
Yeah.
Which, I could show you the words that I wrote, and even if this paper burns, and all of everything here is gone, it used to be useful. When I existed, when the pen existed, when it worked, it was all useful, and it's no longer useful, and that's okay. And we need to be okay with this. We don't have to feel so selfish that we all individually have to exist forever. That is such a selfish idea when you think about it, that you are so important that essentially God will be creating an infinitely lasting version of yourself that is immune to deterioration, immune to death, immune to all of these things. And I guess that is part of the loss that people are afraid of or feel when they leave religion, that You used to be an immortal being or have that promise of someday being an immortal being, and now you're just a human. You're just an animal that's going to die eventually, and that is probably the end of it. But that's okay. That's not a bad thing. It just means that, like you said, it's more rare, so it's more valuable. It's like having a limited edition, I don't know, vinyl that will degrade every time you play it. It doesn't mean that it's worthless. It means that it's super rare and a collectible item, and it's actually more valuable because that's the last one or whatever. So there's only one of you. Make it count. Is what I'm saying.
No, that's the kind of thing that got me also on the path of questioning Islam and looking at it from the perspective of what if this isn't true? And I started thinking about if it wasn't true and it was man-made, what would be the motivations for creating it? And I think you just tapped into a lot of those reasons that I think occurred to me when I was 17, 18. And that was, this is something that addresses human fears, and it comforts the human ego, because it's a tough pill to swallow to think that, when we die, that's it, and we can all die at any time, and that, the injustices that happen to us in this life might never be addressed properly. Like, let's say someone, a drunk driver kills your loved one, that there will be no, and they get away with it, and that there will be no justice to make that right. I think it's like a real tough hit on the ego. And then religion comes in. It promises us all of these things and makes us feel better. And when I started looking at Islam that way, it really lost its divine, special, fantastical aspect.
Mm-hmm. I want to read a few comments, and I guess we could comment on them.
Sure.
T-Rex, thanks for the super chat. Basically echoing what we were just saying, the fact that our lives are finite and short doesn't make them pointless. It makes them more precious and worth savoring. I agree.
Agree completely.
Mariana says, honestly, we don't know where the world came from, and that's okay. I agree with the sentiment, but not the wording. And I'm going to be a bit nitpicky here, because by saying that where the world came from, that we're implying or assuming that it had to come from
From
something that,
somewhere.
yeah, from somewhere, that there's a process of the world coming instead of the world already being here. It's a loaded question that I don't think the commenter intended to be loaded, but they may not realize that trying to answer the question itself, just don't fall into the loaded question. Just be aware that this question has some premises built into it of where did the world come from implies that there's a place that the world could come from and that it's not already here. So we don't know if there was a source or an entity that has any will in the creation of the world, or if it just is. And yeah, but we're okay with that. I don't think I'll lose any sleep over that. And I'm okay with people having theories or hypotheses about where the world came from, or anything of that nature. It's just that when these theories then become the basis for how they want you and other people in their life to live their lives and die, that's where it becomes a problem. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. The thing to remember too is that this whole thing of I don't know feels like such an unacceptable thing. Again, I think just for the ego to think, well, how can I just live my life not knowing all of these, the answers to all of these important questions? And I think part of the acceptance of life and to be able to lead a more meaningful life is to have that acceptance of your limitation. And I think Muslims try to get out of it and claim, well, look at us, we're submitting to the will of Allah. Look at how modest and humble we are on our own weakness. But it's actually a false modesty in a lot of ways. And I speak this to how I felt about it as a Muslim, because I felt, well, I'm aligned with God and He has all the answers, so all will be well. So it's actually the complete opposite of that. It's claiming you know all the answers without even having them.
Yeah. I guess I want to answer this question. I'll let you go first, though. Chris, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, do either of you read much academic historical work into early Islam and or the Quran? Have you done any of that?
I had a phase where I did. The one thing I'll mention is it's really hard to find that in English, like a really good academic historical work in English, unless it's been translated from the Arabic. I have had phases where I looked into Arabic historical work because that's something that also interests my father, and so we always had those books around the house. It has been a while, so a lot of it came from that initial phase of exploring the religion and trying to learn more about it. How about you?
Uh, Not really, because to tell you the truth, it got to a point of researching that I started to be bored of the topic, and I'm more interested in, I guess, how people are affected by religion, what people think about it, how they believe, and so on, than I am in the facts about it. So I'm trying to kind of recharge and then get a renewed interest in the academic work. Um, but I have picked up a book recently, or a while ago, and I started reading it recently, called Conquests and Cultures, by Thomas Sowell. I don't think it's not explicitly about Islam, but it does mention obviously conquests that have to do with Islam. So that's interesting. If you have any suggestions for things that we should check out, please do leave them in the live chat.
Please do.
And HTP Key, thank you as well for the super chat. Says, what did both of you find the most challenging after deconverting from Islam?
You
That's a
want to
good
go
question.
first?
You can go ahead.
Okay.
Or are you still thinking of it?
Oh, no, no, I know what to say. For me, it was too. I mean, I've been talking about this stuff nonstop for the last couple of weeks. So the first thing that was really hard was feeling disconnected from my roots, from my heritage. As someone who, well, I've been an immigrant multiple times my whole childhood, so I moved back and forth from North America to Europe to the Middle East, and then back to North America again. And so I always felt this lack of connection with, my background, my Palestinian background, which is already tough because, like many Palestinians around the world, I've never actually even been to Palestine. And so once I lost Islam as well, I realized that I've separated myself from so many of the things that tie Arab communities together, Muslim communities. And it's something that I would say I've accepted now, but it's still something that causes issues because I'll always feel different because of this fundamental reason. And the second thing that I found most challenging was, again, like the thing we talked about earlier, trying to rebuild my life philosophy, like where I got my values from, where I got my fulfillment from, where I got my purpose from without Islam. And this is something that took me many, many, many years to find. And it's not something you can just sit down and do. You have to keep going on with your life and doing things. So it's something you kind of have to figure out on the fly, which makes it even more difficult.
I hear you. Um, it's good to remind people that it's a process, and even to this day, there are probably things that no matter how long ago you left, there might be things here and there that still have not been dealt with, but it just
Yeah.
gets better with time. So yeah, it's and you need time, because some things only reveal themselves in time and with experience and with enough of a chance. But you can't just sit down and hammer it, till you're done. Um, I don't really have one thing to select for most challenging, because there's been a lot of different facets to it. There's first that feeling of betrayal and anger at how why did everyone make me feel like I was crazy, when in reality everything I'm reading, everything I'm listening to sounds really, really hard to believe. And especially once you click that button, once you have that realization, you can't undo it. And then it's almost like you're viewing the world in a new light. Now you see things that you hadn't seen before. So that frustration at first was difficult to deal with, because I didn't want to take it out on anyone in my life who was still a Muslim, and at the same time, I didn't want to be discouraged by how almost immune to reason, immune to um, the rules of any games that are being played, like immune to the rules of debating. Islam seemed to be immune to everything else that we subject ourselves and every other idea to. Islam seemed to have a special category and a special place in society, be it, among Muslims or among non-Muslims as well. And it was very frustrating to witness that while I'm trying to accept that it's fine. I can accept that I have moved on right now, but it's also not fine because other people are still going through this, and I'm just watching them go through it. There's not much I could do. So it took some time to actually, getting the channel going and helping people makes me feel better about that sort of thing. Um, but that is one of the things that people ask is, you left Islam. Why are you still talking about it? It's because it's still relevant to my life and a lot of people's lives. And Islam doesn't leave you away once you leave it. The rest of your life is still the same. Everyone else in your life still has expectations about it. And for me, it's just the realization that if I don't help be part of the solution's still going to remain very far away. And other people who wish to make the same transition might not be able to, or might not even know that it's an option. So I guess, yeah, the most difficult thing for me after deconstructing from Islam is the realization that there are others that are still going through it and haven't even gotten to this point of where I am right now, and that I may not be able to get to all of them. Yeah. I don't know if that's a sad note to end that answer on, but I'm being honest here.
I think it's actually an optimistic thing of, taking all that pain and suffering and trying to turn it into something positive that can help others. And I mean, for me personally, one of my motivations for creating my YouTube channel and talking about all this stuff is partly because I have the freedom to do it in a way in which a lot of others I know don't. And in a way, Islam not being this looming, threatening presence in my life the same way it is for others is actually the thing that motivated me to want to talk about it more. Because it really is important to be able to be a voice for those who want to just scream out, want to just express themselves, want to just be themselves. And for whatever reason, because of their families or where they happen to be living, they'll never be able to, or it will be very difficult to ever be able to.
Yeah. And I want to make it clear that I'm sure you also come at it from a similar place. It's not about unfinished business or frustration that I want to take out, by scapegoating Islam for problems in my life, or that I want to blame all the problems in the world or all the problems in Muslim societies on just Islam. It's seeing people struggle, thinking that I have, to some extent, part of the answer, which is not, the answer is that there is no God. The answer is that you are free to make a decision for yourself, and you don't have to be a slave to the fear forever. You don't have to be a slave to the expectations of others. You are not crazy for being the only one in your family who thinks this way. You're not crazy for not being able to just push it aside like a lot of casual Muslims and say, this is beyond me. It's okay. I'm talking to the person who's, thinks to some extent like me. It's okay to question. It's okay to leave. And my job is not done till as many people as I can reach can get that message. Not to, deconvert as many people as possible, or like, cause them to leave their religion, but just let them know that it's an option, and that our representation is it deserves to be a lot better than it actually is, because most of the time we're being represented by caricatures of what we're supposed to be, what Muslims think we're like, or by some people among us that you may not identify with, and I get that a lot from people. um, so yeah, it's not a hopeless sort of message. I'm just saying that is the most difficult part for me, is realizing how much work still needs to be done and how far away we are from the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can speak for yourself there. I see myself as like a purely motivated by revenge. If anyone wants to take anything from this video, Secular Spirit is basically John Wick seeking revenge against Allah.
Allah got your dog.
Allah got my dog.
Yeah. Let me read a few more comments, and then we'll get back to
I
whatever it
did
is we were
see
talking about.
a good question from someone,
Sure.
actually from Homo sapiens. Should I highlight it?
Sure.
Okay. So Homo sapiens asks, how do you deal with people assuming you're Muslim? It happens to me
Oh
all the
boy.
time. How about you?
Um, depends on the setting I'm in, but most of the time I tell them, no, I'm not. I used to be, and I'm not anymore. And I don't just say I'm not, so they assume, oh, so he might be Christian. Like he's from an Arab
Mm,
country. It's the other option. I tell them, I used to be Muslim. I'm not anymore.
mm.
Unless the situation really doesn't call for it, and I could just let it slip and move on with my day. But if we're going to continue interacting, I kind of make that clear.
I'd say I do the same kind of thing. I have to be honest, it does kind of depress me sometimes where I feel like just because of my name, I'll never be able to just escape the whole Muslim reality, the Muslim label. And I think it's from a lot of people, it's kind of not like they're not intending to do any harm or anything. They're just assuming that, and they in some cases actually want to be respectful. So I get things like, "Oh, you're not fasting for Ramadan, right? Or you don't have to go to prayer, right?" So things like that. Or is it okay that there's bacon? Yes, it is okay. It's bacon. Give me more, please. So from that kind of angle, I don't mind it. But when it does come up, I do the same thing as you. I just try to clarify very clearly. Not only am I not Muslim, I'm not religious. I'm completely detached from Islam as a faith.
Right. And I don't like saying I'm not religious because it might just imply, yes, I'm Muslim, but I'm not practicing right now, but it's something I intend on doing or something like that. I like to tell them I used to be Muslim, I'm not anymore. Not because I want to further the discussion about my faith, but just to have it register on their radar that kind of person exists, that there could be someone out there who was Muslim and isn't anymore and is not the caricature that they expect us to be. So I
Yeah.
don't particularly want to continue having that conversation about religion, but at least now they know that's an ex-Muslim that I know and he doesn't seem like a prick. So, that's something, that's a data point. And we need more of that data to exist. We need people to register that we do exist around them, and it's not just YouTubers on the internet, if they even come across those
Mhm.
people. So that's why I do it, not to be argumentative, but also to not lead them on. Because if I were to just go along with their presumption, am I not being a liar in that way? Because I'm not a Muslim, um, and if they'll treat me any differently for it, then it is what it is. I
It's out
don't
of your
want any.
control.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't want preferential treatment under the assumption that I am a Muslim. If you're going to treat me differently, then do it. I don't mind.
For,
Um,
for me,
yeah.
my long story short that I say is, I was Muslim and then Allah gave my wife cancer and then took away my dog. And I had to go on revenge
You're still
rampage.
insistent on
Okay, last time I do a John Wick
yeah.
reference.
Thank you, Lisa Mora, for the super chat and the good question. How do people assume you're a Muslim?
Name, just my name. They see my
But
name, first name or
let
even last name.
let's take the question a bit differently. Like, what does that look like? How does it manifest? Their assumption. How do you know that they assume that you're a Muslim?
Well, they'll just ask, honestly. They'll see my name or I'll introduce myself, then they'll hear my name. Oh, and they're like, "How are you, brother? Oh, you're Muslim." Or they'll just ask questions like, "Oh, do you know a good mosque in the area?" Or usually what it ends up being is they'll talk to me in Arabic right
Mhm.
away, and uh, if and unchecked, it's amazing how many times this has happened. The conversation will go, and let's say I haven't mentioned that I'm no longer Muslim or anything like that. It's astounding how quickly the conversation could go with a complete stranger from "How are you? Oh, you're Muslim," within minutes to "Can you believe these gays in the Pride Parade?" or something like that. It's shockingly quickly. Or "Can you believe what
Yeah.
these women are wearing in this country?"
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it manifests as a question, like they want to make sure first, are you Muslim, by the way?
Mm,
And sometimes they don't necessarily mean anything, I guess most of the time they don't mean anything nefarious by it. They're
no.
just like trying to relate to you. And when that has happened, and I said I used to be Muslim, I'm not anymore. That's still something we can relate to. That means I understand Islam to some extent the way that they do. Like it's not context that I'm missing. If they said I'm fasting, I'm not going to be like, oh, what's that? So there's still something we can relate to here,
And that's
but
what people
also
are
without
looking
the.
for. They're looking
Yeah,
for connection. They want to connect with you.
exactly. And sometimes like they're not even bothered by it. They're just more curious. Like, what do you mean? What, you left? What? So you're a Christian now? That's usually the second question that I get. Um, And I don't blame them, because that's the only other possibility that they imagine
That they can
someone leaves Islam
compute.
for.
Yeah.
And that's fine. I tell them, no, I'm not. And then we can continue talking about something else that just establishes that such a person can exist. And you'd be surprised. Sometimes they start asking me questions about my life, and maybe sometimes because they wonder what their life would look like if they're not Muslim. Would they be doing all these things that Islam tells them not to do? And do I do those things? And sometimes they just assume by saying something to you, a greeting in in Arabic or "Assalamu alaikum" or something, that's their assumption. So it happens in different ways. It doesn't really bother me. It's just that I wish that we get to a point in time where that's not a safe assumption to make. Just like you can't just walk up to a guy called Chris or Christopher and assume that he's a Christian.
Yeah,
You can't do
exactly.
that. Yeah.
I will also mention for work. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a journalist in my day job. I will get assigned articles from time to time by my editors who aren't Muslim. I will get assigned to Islam-related articles because I think they're just thinking, oh, he's our he's our go-to Muslim guy. We'll let him do it, or it'll be easier for him to do it than for someone who's a non-Muslim.
Right. And I mean, at least you're more familiar with the language and with what to look up if you need to
The
find more
culture,
information.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
or where to start, I guess. Um, and thank you, Lissa, again for the other super chat saying mahalo to both of you for taking the time to talk with us. I appreciate it. Um, I mean, we can keep answering questions. There are still good ones. Or do you want to? Was there anything else that you wanted to continue about your
Mm.
story out of religion?
Oh, I mean, we could go on for hours and hours. There was one thing I wanted to ask you about, just
Mhm.
from your own experience, and this is tied to the Islamic lore. So one thing I talked about that really had a big, as I'm sure people watching can guess, I'm a bit of a movie buff. Can't help but reference a movie every 10 minutes or so. Uh, and I had a really one really big influence in my life was this movie about Islam that was shown to me when I was in school. It's called The Message in English, El Risala. So
Mhm.
that's a movie from the 1970s, and it basically is like this big biopic about the origin of Islam and how the first Muslims were able to triumph over the non-believers around them and turn Islam into what it is today. So I think we may have discussed this before. I'm sorry if I forgot, but have you seen this movie? Are you aware of it?
I'm aware of it. I might have seen like clips of it when I was younger, but I haven't watched the whole thing from start to finish.
Yeah, Calo Repo says Anthony Quinn was in it. Yeah, they somehow managed to get like a major Hollywood actor to be a prominent character in it. And the only thing I really wanted to add then was, I think, especially for kids, when you believe these things are true, the way I described it in my video was, it's like imagine Lord of the Rings, except it's real. It's like human beings. It's not orcs and elves and stuff. It's real human beings, just like you and me, fighting for the forces of good against the forces of evil. And my belief was that this didn't happen in some book or some fantasy realm. This actually happened in the real world, and it just blew me away that those people. It's really like the ultimate underdog story if you look into the details of what Muslims are taught about Muhammad's life, how he was all alone and he was abused and reviled, and his followers were beaten and they had to run away, and then they went. Good one, T Rex. Wait, you mean Lord of the Rings isn't real? Sorry to blow up that bubble for you. Yeah, Santa Claus isn't real too. And so yeah, anyway, so for those Muslims to go from such a small standing to the biggest religion in the world at that point, or one of the biggest, was something that was awe-inspiring. And seeing the footage of the battles that the Muslims fought, all that kind of stuff just made it feel even more real in my mind. And it just goes to show, people ask, why is Islam so big? Why is Christianity so big today? They have really good stories that really resonate with people across the world.
Yeah, that's something that I've said before, is that unfortunately there isn't a story, and I don't think there ever will be, for not believing in religion.
Yeah,
Because
try pitching that story to Hollywood.
yeah, I mean, unless the story is pitching the explicit position that there is no God and this is proof that there is no God, and I don't think, most atheists don't actually believe positively or assert positively that there is no God. So there isn't a compelling narrative there. I mean, we could tell a narrative of a atheist, or one particular person's story, or we can make up one, but it's still not as iconic as having the one guy, the symbol of that story, be present in every story, or every other ones. So narrative is always more appealing than facts or truth, or just straight up analysis of something. And I don't know how to fix that. I mean, there's storytelling. I guess we could start writing our own stories about the little atheist that could, and the little atheist that thought really hard. But the religion has the advantage, of course, of having repeatable stories that kind of create a lore around it. Um, but it is what it is. There still will always be people who interpret these stories as stories and realize that it's there's nothing that special about these stories. I mean, this is something that's frustrating me right now. I'm working on a video where I had a bunch of conversations with sheikhs in the Middle East, and I'm transcribing them now, and I'm trying to write a script about something along the lines of pitfalls in conversations with religious scholars. And it's so frustrating how their thoughts are so unrefined compared to Christian apologetics. Like, for example, one thing that we argued about was that the sheikh was convinced that the method of transmission of a tawatur, I don't know how to translate that into English, but essentially that a bunch of trusted, honest people are transmitting a piece of information to a bunch of trusted, honest people, and you can kind of trace the chain all the way back to the source of information, which is Muhammad. That should be proof that Islam is true somehow, or that your trust in the elders of your community, or your trust in scholars or people that we deem honest or informed, that is something that everyone should have. And if you don't have that, that's because you're arrogant, and so on and so forth. So we're dealing with cultural assumptions that are theirs, and they don't realize that they only exist in their little world. Officially, that you can't just go to a scientist and be like, "Trust me, all the people are trustworthy up until Muhammad. Therefore, we have truth of Islam." Um, I don't even know how I got here, but I just needed to rant about that because it's so frustrating listening to these conversations that I can't. It took me like several days to transcribe like 1 hour of conversation because of how silly the points that they made were.
Well, the
But
scary thing
yeah.
for me is that these are people in respected positions that are teaching countless people in their communities. And I think the thing that really sticks out to me from what you said was this blind appeal to tradition or authority, which I think is where Islam gets a lot of its power from. It's really hard to challenge these ideas or to innovate new ones, things that are so crucial to the scientific process that we all benefit from. Imagine if science had that same kind of idea of, well, this is the way people are always doing it, so let's just do it this way because that's what all these old dead people said.
Yeah. And I guess that goes back to what's the most frustrating thing about deconstructing from Islam is how unworthy it even feels of people falling for it, of how simplistic it is once you strip away all that pressure from society, once you strip away the conformity, everyone's saying the same thing all around you all the time. If it's just you with a clear head, you'll see how silly it all is, really. And that's the frustrating part about it. But go ahead.
Well, like the thing that we have in common, again, if I was to distill why I left like the whole 3-hour video into a sentence, it would be I realized that the reasons I believed Islam was true weren't good reasons to believe. That's all it really comes down to. It was a lot of things that I was just told were true by the people that I trusted in my life, using really faulty logic or just emotional thinking. So the combination of both those things, I would say, like faulty reasoning and gullibility due to emotional reasons. And it really just takes looking at it from a different perspective to be able to see it. And I don't know how to do that. Let's say I'm talking to a Muslim, how to get them to see it that way. I think in many ways it has to really be this process that comes from within, this willingness to accept that Islam might not be true. And speaking personally, it took a long time. It was really hard for me to have that willingness.
Mhm. I think that putting yourself in other people's shoes, which might also be called empathy, is what got me out of religion. And it was the thing that was kind of holding back the believers that I spoke to, where it's not like they were unempathetic people, but specifically when it came to having empathy or putting yourself in the shoes of someone who doesn't believe already, and then trying to approach the religion from that angle, they were clueless. They could not, for the life of them, think, if I didn't believe this was true, that first step was so difficult for them to do, because if you just assume for a second that what if I believe Islam is not true, you're kind of committing kufr, you're committing disbelief, you're letting room for the devil to, wiggle in and make you doubt. So they were incapable of even thinking, if I didn't believe what I already believe, how would I arrive to this point? But I was capable of doing that, and I realized if I didn't believe it already, I most likely would not be here, because I can't chart a path for someone to get to where I am right now. I don't even know why I am where I am right now. It's mostly because I was indoctrinated into it. But if I were to start from scratch, knowing all that I know and even gaining more information, there's no path to get me to this belief. This belief, to be clear, not disbelief.
This
Yeah.
disbelief. Yeah.
This particular
Yeah.
belief. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you. What would you say if someone was just asking you, first thing that comes to mind? Well, what is the weirdest, most outlandish thing that you believed when you were still Muslim?
Man, that's tough to think of them as a list and pick one. I thought of a lot of little outlandish things, but adding them all together, uh, like hasad or evil eye, essentially, I somewhat believed in that. I wasn't exactly sure, but the more that people around me acted as if they believed in it, sometimes when it served me to believe in it, I did. Like this idea that if someone sees what you have and envies it, they can give you an evil eye and then you no longer have it. Or, say you bought a car and it's nice and people don't say mashallah, they don't invoke God's protection when admiring the car, then you might get a scratch or crash it or something worse. And that applies to every facet of your life. I somehow believed in that a little bit. So when something bad happened to me, I would think, who gave me the evil eye? I don't deserve this sometimes. But yeah, that's one thing. What about you?
Uh, it's a tough one. Again, like I should have thought of this before I asked the question. It would probably be the stuff that I believed about the day of judgment, like the stuff that I believed would really happen one day. And one of the things that terrified me the most was, I think in English they're called Gog and Magog, if you
Yeah,
know
Juj
them.
and Majuj.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Juj and Majuj. So to summarize quickly, these two evil, corrupt tribes, they're right now, supposedly, they're trapped uh, amidst these mountains somewhere in Central Asia. They've been trapped there by God. And this is what I was taught that
No, by
um,
Dhul Qarnayn.
oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm mixing up the details. So basically what matters is that they're trapped. But what they do every day is they try to dismantle the wall that keeps them trapped. So they dismantle, like they take it apart brick by brick or whatever it is. They go to sleep and then all their work is undone. So the wall comes back up. But one of these days, they're going to wake up that morning and they're going to find that their work isn't undone and they're going to be unleashed into the world to cause mayhem, to cause destruction, and just murder innocent people like me. And I was constantly terrified about this, like wondering, oh my God, are they going to be released today? I hope the wall is rebuilt. And to imagine that to truly believe that this was something real, uh, to this day, it blows my mind that I didn't question it.
Yeah, I remember I learned about it around the same time that Google Earth was a thing. That was before Google Maps. Like you had to install the application called Google Earth, and it was a whole ordeal. But um, I remember thinking, wait a second. So someone else must have looked through all of Google Earth to try to find them. And even back then, I knew if Google Earth is for the civilians, then I wonder who, whoever they are, the ruling class, they must have access to satellites and they can see everything. So if that is real, why don't they show proof of that and then tell people that Islam is true? Like, I was so conditioned to think of Islam as the center of the universe, that everyone is pondering the question of, is Islam true or not, that there are conspiracies to hide its truthfulness, all that sort of stuff. And I even thought, I've been to in Medina and I prayed in front of Muhammad's grave, as people like to do. And I thought to myself, why don't they just uncover his body, and that will be proof for the entire world, because we believe as Muslims that prophets' bodies don't decompose, or the earth
Mhm.
doesn't take them or something.
Yeah.
And I was told something along the lines of how it would be disrespectful to his corpse. But screw disrespectful. I don't. If that was me, I wouldn't give a crap. If I was Muhammad, I would think, yes, display it as evidence. Why wouldn't you want most people to join the religion, even though that's not really evidence? It's another non sequitur that we don't know how this happened, that a body didn't decompose. But by the way, there's never been proof of that. There's always been stories of
Mhm.
bodies that don't decompose, and supposedly that's evidence for Islam being true. But there's never been definitive proof of a body that doesn't decompose ever. Yeah, but I've always had these questions, even as a little kid, but they were quickly answered by someone in my life or another. Yeah, you know why at Juj and Matjuj their wall wasn't demolished? So this was also a question that I had. If every day they get so close, they're about to demolish the wall completely, can't one of them just like jump over? Like, why do they have to like completely demolish it? Or are they just, it's just out of reach, but no one can seem to get over the wall somehow? No, they don't have ladders in that universe, in
Well,
that part of
the
the
thing to
universe.
add to is I think they were giants as well, if I'm not mistaken. Like they were supposed to be like super tall, so that adds to it as well.
Yeah, maybe. But the reason why the wall would construct back, or like that they wouldn't be able to get to it, is because they need to say inshallah at the end,
Yes. Oh,
that
yeah, yeah. I
we'll get
remember
to it
that now.
tomorrow,
Oh,
inshallah. By the way, there's a bit of a delay between
that's
your video and your
oh.
audio. Might want to
Should I
reset
try
that.
removing myself and then adding myself again?
Yeah, do
Okay,
that.
let's do that. Okay.
Okay, it's a bit trippy. Um, I thought Gog and Magog were little minion-sized folks. Yeah, we'll steal the moon together. Yeah, I don't remember the details about their size, but I remember asking questions from a young age. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Fun fact: Yasser Qadi, he's an Islamic preacher and scholar. He jokingly once mentioned during a lecture that he has a friend who has a theory. Um, Talking about Yasser Qadi, who has a friend who has a theory that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are like kind of like zombies. He didn't say the word zombies, but are like the unalived, the undead. And it's silly that he'd go as far as believing in something like a zombie, then say there's no such thing as Ya'juj and
Of
Ma'juj.
course. Well, that would be ridiculous, right? But
Yeah.
I just wanted to say you remind me of like a trauma I'd forgotten for like 20 years of the whole that one time that they say inshallah, God willing, they'll finally get what they want.
Right. Yeah. What if
Isn't that
one of them says
terrifying?
inshallah? Yeah. And I think they will before the day of judgment. It's one of the signs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
By
I
the way,
see a
chat,
few
does
people talking about the Dajjal in the live chat as well.
right.
I guess you could translate that to Antichrist. I guess it's the Muslim equivalent of the Christian
Yeah, yeah.
Antichrist,
Al-Masih al-Dajjal, like it has the word Masih in it.
the
The
Messiah. Yeah.
Messiah. Yeah. By the way, I was going to ask the live chat, is Secular Spirits video lagging a little bit with the
Yeah,
audio, or
let
is it
me
just
know,
on my
everyone.
end? Yeah. Let me know in
I
the
will
live chat.
keep talking. I will not talk about John Wick anymore. No more
You
John Wick
had to.
talk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. You're fine.
Same
It's lagging on my end, but that's okay. What were we just talking about right before that?
Dajjal.
Yeah, the Dajjal. I can't remember off the top of my head all the details, but it was something like he's gonna come back before the day of judgment. He has one eye. He
He's
has
gonna
kafir written on his forehead.
yeah, exactly. And he's gonna perform miracles that will trick people into believing that he's the real Messiah. So for those of you who don't know, Muslims actually believe Jesus will come back the day of judgment the same way that I think Christians do. They just don't think he's the son of God. But anyway, so this false Messiah will trick people, and the followers that this is what I was taught as a kid. The followers that believe him will go to hell with him. So I was terrified about that as well. Like, what if I am tricked by the Dajjal? And I remember just in my childhood, different people were alleged to be the Dajjal. So I remember George Bush. Well, there's some talk that George Bush was the Dajjal, and what's his name, Benjamin Netanyahu as well, the Israeli
Right.
prime minister or whatever he was when I was a kid. So
Yeah, it's
more fun stuff to teach the little kids.
I remember even that I had questions about. So the Dajjal would have kafir written on his forehead, but I seem to recall that not everyone will be able to see it.
Well, he'd wear
Only
like
the
makeup concealer to cover it.
okay, I didn't hear that detail.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
But I wonder, does it kafir in Arabic, in English, or in the language of the person that's reading it? Who knows?
True.
But if God is
Good
capable of
point.
such like if that's a weapon in God's arsenal, why the heck isn't he using these tricks right now to somehow make his case for his existence? Like, why wait till the day of judgment or close to it to then start writing things on people's foreheads and doing magic?
It's not for us to know. We just have to accept it.
God knows best.
God
But
knows
as
best.
there's also the question of, wait, so you're saying the way to convince people that someone is a prophet and that they have a message from God is to do some magic tricks, right? Like do some miracles. And Muslims believe that there's a difference between miracles and magic, because magic is an illusion, miracles are the real deal. But as an observer, you can't really tell the difference. So God acknowledges that you could send a magician of some sort, a trickster, and convince people to follow him. So he knows that this is a shitty method of proving prophethood. Yet somehow he uses it as a trap for those who don't
Interesting.
believe. Like
I
I
never
don't
thought
I don't
about
get
that.
it. He knows that's a con man move. So why are con men indistinguishable from prophets?
Well, Kit Kat explains it so well because it's a test. Duh.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's all kind of circular, right? Like the people who see it the way that they're supposed to see it as a kafir, that's because they're bad and they deserve to see it that way. It's not that God is tricking them, it's that God is making them see what they want to see, and it's all that kind of circular BS. But everything brings up a bunch of questions, and if you focus on the details, you'll be accused of being nitpicky, and being trying to disprove Islam or something. But the devil's in the details, meaning that
Yeah.
if God is not capable of preserving the story with the details that make sense, then it's starting to sound like a liar, not really like God.
Well, the true believers will know the truth. That's all you need to know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still have a few comments that I wanted to highlight,
Oh,
and
sure. Let's
then
do them.
HTP Key, thank you for the super chat, says, are there any bad reasons to leave religion?
That's a really interesting one, isn't it? I mean, jokes aside, I know I promised not to bring this movie up again. But if you're just leaving a religion because something bad happened to you, not going to mention dogs or cancer, even though I just did, that's probably not a good reason to leave a religion. And this is something that a religion like Islam, and I'm pretty sure Christianity does as well, addresses, where the bad things that happen are part of God's plan, and you just have to trust in Him. So I would say my issue with that is that you might be susceptible to returning back to the religion or converting to another religion if you're leaving it for that kind of, well, this God didn't do something good for me. He didn't answer my prayer. Maybe this one will. So I think that's the risk with that kind of reason to leave a specific religion.
I think that in this question is sort of another question of, what's a good reason for leaving Islam? And I think it's important to address that one too, that we're almost like we're asked that question, why did you leave Islam, so that someone can assess whether or not it's a good reason to leave. And I don't think any Muslim in the world, for the most part, or most Muslims, let's put it that way, would not hear you give a reason and say, you know what, that sounds like a good reason to leave Islam. Good luck. I support you.
There's no such
Most
thing
of
as
the
a good
time,
reason.
yeah, there's no such thing. So it's just a question to ask you, what is your reason? Oh, that's a bad reason. That's not a reason to reject the truth, and so on and so forth. So to answer it from that angle, you can leave any religion at any point without having to justify yourself to anyone. And that goes to also, it's hard to leave without justifying it to yourself because you're expected to, give a good reason. But unless that religion has proven itself to be true somehow, you can just leave without thinking twice about it. It's never that easy, but you could. Some people do it that way. So from that angle, is there a bad reason to leave this religion? Not really, but similar to what you said, if you leave because, you hear these stories of like, I used to be an atheist, I used to be angry at God, and now I found God again. Well, I don't know if that counts as you leaving. If you're angry at God, you still believe in God. So if you leave because you have emotions that have to do with that religion or the God in that religion or a symbol in it, and that's it, and you don't work on understanding and resolving them, then you're still susceptible. You might just go back to finding a different version of God that you're not angry at, or you might take it out on yourself and be like, I was wrong because I was angry at God. So, don't leave for that reason because you're angry at God. You're not really leaving in that case. You're just transforming your relationship with God. I hope that answers that. Also, Lissa Mora, thanks again for the super chat, says, I love the little atheist that could. We need to write a kid's book, The Little Atheist That Could. It sounds a bit scary, like, oh, they're indoctrinating the children, but aren't there religious books for children already?
Well, because
So,
that's okay because you're teaching them the truth.
yeah. That's the thing, asserting your position openly and proudly as a non-believer or ex-believer is seen as problematic or calling for attention, or, just leave the topic alone. But if you were to assert it in any other way, that's okay. That's understandable. That's self-representation.
Well,
So
it's interesting that you say that. One of the comments I got on my leaving Islam story video was, "It's fine." The person said, "It's fine that you left. That's okay." But I think they said something like, "It's dangerous or irresponsible to then try to teach others to leave a religion too, based on your experiences." And I never responded to it, but I thought, well, I'm not saying, okay, you should leave the religion too at any point in the video. I do say that I hope that people leave of their own accord, and that I think that that will make the world a better place. But I'm not sending it out there to say, you must do exactly what I did. And so beyond that, it's just, why can't, even if you did, why can't you?
yeah, I mean, I don't think such a person would object to a Muslim making a video saying, this is how I converted, or this is my story with Islam. They don't seem to mind that. They'd be like, yes, use your experience to justify why Islam is true and why people should join it. But you're not even doing the same thing in the opposite way, and yet you're being chastised for it. So no, people are allowed to say whatever they want to say, and because whether or not I had a bad experience with Islam, I have the right to talk about it. Even if for me, it wasn't, again, this is why I don't like answering the question, why did you leave Islam, with a video detailing everything that went on in my life that has to do with Islam. Because a lot of these are not why I left. They're kind of things that happened while I stayed, or why I stayed in some reasons. So yeah, someone having negative experiences with Islam might be a reason they left Islam. In my case, it was never a reason I left Islam. It was things that happened because I stayed. So yeah, it's we have a right to express what we think and how we think, because if we don't, the only alternative will be all the lies told about us and about how we think that Muslims have grown up with and continue to hear in their everyday life and in their lectures and so on. Let's see, read a few more comments. Cherno Jallo, Aladdin, Islam left you long before you left, and I don't see any reason of justifying. I bet you will not give any reason to condemn the faith. I don't even understand what that means, to condemn the faith. What does that mean to you?
Um, Maybe they meant to say you don't have any good reasons to
Reasons to
condemn.
condemn the faith? Like, what does condemn the faith mean? Not to pull a Jordan Peterson, but what, like to say that
Well,
Islam is
what
not
do
a good
you mean?
religion? Is that what do you mean by condemning the faith? What is faith? Um, like not a good reason to condemn. Like there are a lot of things that I condemn about Islam. Watch all my videos where I talk about how these things affect people and how they're harmful. Just all the ideas that Islam has about women, for example, or your own relationship with your sexuality,
Mm.
or your thoughts on guilt and your actions and accountability and torture being a something that God really craves for some reason, or retribution or torture or revenge being the same as justice. So many things to condemn Islam on. Um, but one does not need to justify themselves to you or to anyone else as to why they don't believe anymore or why they're not a Muslim anymore.
I thought you were gonna comment on the Islam left you long before you left part. Wait, so
Right.
so
Yeah.
what does that mean exactly? That, oh, God decided, you know what? I don't want this person to be Muslim anymore. I want to condemn him to hell.
Yeah, it's also kind of a bit of a sour, sour rejected boyfriend trope
Yeah,
of
like we
like, I
don't
didn't
even
want
want
you.
you anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I rejected you first. Okay, so God decided that I should leave before I decided that I should leave.
so much for free
Then
will.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I think I've been very clear about my thoughts on Islam, and I continue to be. Uh, General Skeptic, thank you as well. Thank
Thank
you so much for the
you,
super
General
chat.
Skeptic.
Hello, gentlemen. This stream is a vibe. It was great seeing both of you in Oslo last year. Hashtag CD24. What's the one thing you believe that makes you cringe now for believing in it because of its absurdity? Care to answer that?
I mean, uh, so many things that I mentioned just in this stream alone that makes me cringe. Do you have any thoughts? I'm gonna think about mine for a second.
Um, the one that comes to mind, and when I was 18, I used to have conversations with my first atheist friend. I actually had a live stream with him a while back on this channel, and I remember him asking me, not as a challenge, but because he wanted to understand how come Islam allows a man to marry more than one woman. And I don't remember if I heard this somewhere or if I was able to come up with it on the spot, but my brain went to, well, this was during a time of war where, a lot of women would be widowed. And because of the societies that they lived in back then, a woman couldn't survive on her own. So it was made permissible because there were more single women or women in need of a man than there were men. Um, and it makes me cringe because I know I wasn't actually like, that's not honestly the answer. The answer is because Allah allows it. And I'm just trying to find a way to make it make sense. But why would God allow it with no expiration date if it was just about wartime or something? I've heard so many horror stories of women being forced into a dynamic where there's another wife that she never consented to, or a dynamic where she has to convince herself that that's okay and she loves sharing her man with another wife or more than one. So even back then I felt like this is BS, but it sounds rational, and I'm kind of cringing at the fact that I said that.
Were
I'm
you
sure there's other
ever
stuff.
were you ever
Yeah.
taught that in paradise Allah would remove the trait of jealousy from women?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll be more beautiful than the heavenly sex maidens that their husbands are plowing, so that's going to be fine. um
Mm.
yeah,
For
can you think
me,
of another
yeah,
one?
I did think of something. Maybe I wouldn't use the word cringe, but I am embarrassed by it, especially, uh, learning so much more about people and human nature now. Just thinking about how homophobic I used to be, and how, let's say I'm watching a movie or something and two men kiss, I would be repulsed, and like, I would literally be mock puking and be like revolted and disgusted. And to think that I used to just genuinely believe there was this abomination, this sin, this horrible, disgusting thing that I couldn't even bear looking at with my open eyes is incredible to me. It just was a way that I had such shocking lack of empathy that I almost can't believe it. that I just couldn't see the humanity in those people.
Right. I mean, I'm gonna take a guess here, but I don't think that back then you would have been disgusted by two women or the thought of two women.
No.
Okay. Yeah, it was specifically the thought of two men, and when you
Yeah.
think of gay, that's what comes to mind.
Yeah. Isn't
Um,
that revealing?
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's kind of indicative of something, and like to some extent, I get it. Men are not that pretty, but it's one thing to be like,
From our
"Ew, I
perspective,
wouldn't."
anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's one thing to be like, "Ew, I wouldn't do that because I don't find men pretty," and to be like, "Ew, someone else is doing that. I can't imagine a single reason in the world except that they're choosing to disobey God or choosing to go against the grain or something." It was only when I met, gay people and became familiar with how they're just, just like the belief thing, they're just doing them. This is not a conspiracy against my God or against my belief system, that I realized, oh, it's me with the belief that's a bit stuck up. Um, so yeah, I feel you there. I'm not surprised. Um, there were some other good questions, like this question from Dison. I wanted to go to Oslo last year. Will there be another one this year? I don't know, but if there
No
ever
idea.
is, yeah, we will make sure that you know. It was really nice meeting people, so I hope that
Yeah.
there's another one.
Yeah. I would love to go again to another
Yeah.
celebrating descent. Yeah.
Random asked me, did the threats from Muslims end for the time you revisited Islam? So there were a period of couple weeks where I tried to practice Islam again. To be honest with you, it's not like I get a recurring frequency or like a stable amount of threats all the time. It's very, here and there. And for the most part, aside from mean comments here and there, I don't receive a lot of threats these days, thankfully. It had no effect, whether or not I did that video. I think there were people who were saying, I hope that, this brings you closer to God and brings you to Islam and so on. But they're, didn't really change the general tone. I think that a lot of people are nicer than we give them credit for, but it's just that there are people who ruin it for everyone. So I don't always get threats. I do every now and then, but the frequency hasn't changed. Um, I am often surprised by how many Muslims don't mind me, and I like that. I just wish that I could trust all of them, so then I wouldn't have to wear this mask. Um, Another question did from Erasa. Do either of you attend any Islamic talks, etc.? I find myself attending a few out of curiosity and a sense of community, but it just feels like looking into a cult from the outside.
My question is, what do they mean? What does Raisa mean by Islamic talk exactly? So I watch things on YouTube all the time from, Amr Sulaiman or, Yasser Qadi or whoever it is. Or does Raisa mean in person?
I don't know. Yeah, in person, I guess. Have you been to any religious talks in person?
No, no. I just don't want to be in that environment, to be honest. And I'm not claiming to know everything that they're going to say, but I generally know the gist of the things that are going to be said, and I just don't like being in those kinds of environments.
Yeah, I've the last time I've been to one was during Ramadan when I was praying, and I made a video about that. Um, but no, I don't really. Maybe I'll watch one every now and then, but that's only explicitly if I'll be commenting on it. But just to watch it, I can't be bothered because I get frustrated with how little pushback they get, and how I guess I'm expecting better, and I'm usually disappointed, so I just don't bother. Yeah, it definitely wouldn't feel like a community. If I were in the middle of it, it would feel more like, well, what am I doing amongst these people? I don't belong here. Um,
Yeah,
and I
I
sort
feel
of
the same
envy
way.
the people who just, autopilot and somehow feel still connected to that. I can't, and I don't want to.
Isn't that interesting though that there's people, mutual friends of ours, who they just don't have that issue. Like they can go to a mosque, they can go to a Ramadan iftar, and they'll even join in the prayer, and they don't have an issue with it. So I guess those people are more of like the cultural Muslims, you could say, maybe, or they just don't see it as a big deal the way we do. So those people do exist. as well.
Yeah, they do. I just even before I left Islam, I felt like there was something different about me, and I'm not able to just implicitly go along with everything that the community, the opinions of the community, in a sense. Um, so yeah, it is what it is. Different strokes for different folks. Why doesn't this host ever talk to other Muslims? All I see is the homie using the victim card in every live. I have a long backlog of videos of me talking to Muslims, and if you want the honest answer of why I'm not doing it more often, is because of sabotage attempts. It's not easy to make sure that I'm talking to an honest person and not someone trying to ruin the live stream. So I'll get back to it eventually, but again, to I guess going back to that point, we don't need to validate ourselves by getting permission from a Muslim or making sure that a Muslim is present for the conversation about Islam. Otherwise, it's not valid to talk about it. Like when two Muslims are talking, you don't even if they're talking about ex-Muslims or Christians or kuffar, you don't expect them to have a kafir on the panel every time. They get to just talk about their experiences, their thoughts, and their dehumanizing ideas. But we're not doing any of that. We're just chatting. So we get to do that.
You know
What
which
else?
Muslim I liked that he came
Mhm.
on your channel many times and he was on my channel as well. Friendly Muslim, if you remember him. Whatever happened to him?
I haven't heard of him in a while.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
hope he's still friendly. Hope he's still fine. Oh. Cool Apple. Thank you for the super chat. Says, I wish some Muslims didn't stop at the, well, I'm not a scholar when they discover obvious issues with Islam, all part of the indoctrination, sadly.
Or they'll say you should talk to a scholar.
Yeah. It's one of those two things. Either like I don't know and this is beyond me, but I choose to ignore it, or I don't know and this is beyond me, but you should talk to someone who knows this stuff. I'm sure they have the answer, even though I don't know it and I'm not going to think about it, which is frustrating. Like how are we not both going to the scholar right now and having this conversation with the scholar? How are you okay with just dumping it and being like, that's not my problem?
God knows best.
Yeah,
The answer is out
that's
there. You just have to find it.
not that there aren't any inquisitive believers out there, but I find that for the most part it's just the kind of want to put it aside type of person,
Yeah.
and the more inquisitive you get, the more likely you are to leave. So yeah. Let's see what else. Jennifer is asking, do you have any thoughts on Islam being easier to denounce because of the moral inconsistencies of Muhammad and his teachings versus Jesus, whose vibe is more palatable and uniformly good? That is a good question. What do you think?
I'm not 100% sure that it's easier to denounce Islam because of Muhammad compared to Jesus. I guess the one thing that really stands out to people is the big elephant in the room that Muhammad married a 6-year-old, and Jesus didn't do that, as far as we're aware, anyway. But if you look into the stories in the Bible and the New Testament, there's plenty that you can find that kind of shatters the palatable, uniformly good vibe of Jesus. There's a lot of things where Jesus seems kind of cruel, capricious, violent, even. And I think it's one of those cases where if you just really look into either figure and what the respective religions teach about them, you're going to find inconsistencies.
I'm going to take a stab at it from a different angle. So, from my experience, showing people horrible things that Muhammad said or did, showing Muslims, either they somehow make themselves okay with that Muhammad did that in that particular context. So they make excuses for it, or they think, no, you must be lying, and they do their best to just push it aside and cast doubt on the source of the information. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it jolts them out of their belief into thinking, wait, he said that. That is let me revise everything else that he said. Let me look into this. That doesn't always happen. Most of the time, it doesn't happen at all. And it's sort of sad to see when they go the route of justification. It's worse than if they didn't know about it at all.
It's kind of the same way that I would say that a lot of people who are more conservative, more religious, support Donald Trump in the United States, where you can tell them, various things Donald Trump has done, various scandals and things he's actually quoted to have said, and they'll find some way to rationalize it or distance themselves from it.
Yeah, it's not the end all be all, but it is something that gives at least like cannon fodder to people who, again, I don't exactly know what their goals are, but people who are commenting stuff like, you know, Islam is this, Islam is that, your prophet did this, your prophet did that. Most of the time it's just, like kind of like hurling a stone at the believer and running away. It's not really, I don't know if they're trying to get the people to think about their beliefs or if just trying to talk down to them. But it gives a lot of ammo to those people because Muhammad has a lot more scandals than Jesus. When Muslims try to do the same thing, there's a lot less ammunition to do it with. But yeah, Jesus being a chill guy, I mean, I'm not a Christian, but it doesn't really sway me towards Christianity anymore because I got that immunity of, I guess, adopting a belief without proof or being convinced by generic arguments that work on insert religion here kind of thing. But maybe it is harder for ex-Christians, I guess, to jolt people out of belief. But yeah, as we were talking about it, it doesn't really get people out of belief just seeing what Muhammad did. People will make excuses for him, or they'll find a way to keep attached to what they believe somehow. So it depends on the person. It's hard to answer.
It's a really good question, though. I like it. Thank you,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
it is. I can read a couple more unless you have anything else that you want to add.
On that point, no, I think you covered it pretty well.
Yeah. Let's see what else. Thanks for the super chat. Again, General Skeptic says, one thing that makes me cringe, realizing that if you believe in an omniscient God, you couldn't have a free will. In fact, you would be pre-programmed. That doesn't make me cringe, but it's something that I struggled with from a young age as a Muslim. What do you think about it?
Well, this was basically explained to me even when I was a kid. I can't remember when exactly, but the idea essentially is that just because God knows exactly what you're going to do doesn't mean that you aren't freely doing it. So you're still that's the way the Muslims who tackle this will look at it. Yeah, sure, God knows everything, but he's not making you do it. But I think when you use logic, you'll see how that doesn't really make sense because you'll always be destined to pick option A over B if God knows you're going to do option A. So, given that He's the creator, it really is an illusion that you have an actual free choice in this.
Yeah, and aside from the question of do we actually have free will or not, if we pause for a second and think about it, God knows what will happen, whether or not your free will led you to do that. God knows it anyway. This whole act seems almost kind of useless. Why are we living out an act that God knows how it ends, and God knows that it ends with most of humanity going to hell? Who designed a world knowing that most of humanity is going to hell? What does God gain out of all of that? Just to sift through the believers and to get the believers out and enjoy them praising Him till the end of time? He can achieve that without any suffering. So just this process of filtration, like whose fault is it that most of created humans are destined to hell, if not the creator who knows that they're destined to hell? It just brings into question, what's the point of this test?
Yeah,
Why is God
what's the
doing any of
point?
this?
Because the thing that we're also taught as Muslims is that God doesn't need anything. Need isn't a word you would use with God. So I guess the only thing you can inevitably be left with is, I don't know, but I trust in Allah anyway, or that God wants to do this for some reason. And
Mm-hmm.
is He sadistic? Is it for fun? Who knows?
Like there's an explanation here that's in Arabic, but let me translate it. It's the theory of the time machine. Imagine that I went to the future and saw a football game between Barcelona and Real Madrid,
Yeah.
and I found out that Real Madrid won, and then I came back and I saw the players playing. Did I make a difference to their
Well,
their fate.
this is exactly the problem of this kind of comparison is if you are using a time machine and you're a viewer, then you aren't really involved, sure. But we're talking about God, who created the entire cosmos, the entire universe, created those teams, created the match, created the time machine. So you can't really compare it in that kind of sense because you're in control of all the variables. And you made them the way they are, exactly as they are.
Yeah, in this example, you're just an observer, and also it's kind of inconsequential at the end of the day. Who wins a soccer game? Who cares? You know, that's not
Speak for
the end of the
yourself.
world. Yeah,
Also,
I don't
this
care.
person's a Real Madrid fan if he said that Real Madrid would win.
That's some deep analysis of a quick comment, but yeah, but it, you know, at the end of the day, you don't have strong, like, say for example, you saw that Real Madrid would win, you wouldn't then have strong feelings about Real Madrid winning, or you knew that they were going to lose and you're rooting for them. You wouldn't have strong feelings about them losing because you already experienced them losing when you saw it, you know, when you used that time machine and you saw it. Yet God is viciously reacting to our disbelief as if he's kind of, you know, he's personally offended. How could this happen? He's surprised by it, but obviously he's not surprised by it. He's known it since before creating us.
Yeah.
So it almost seems silly to then witness us struggle and witness us live, only to then go to hell and witness us falling into hell and enjoy the process of all of this. What kind of merciful, and then call himself the merciful somehow. Good call,
By
by
the
the
way,
way.
I
He
was right.
confirmed.
Yeah, I was right.
Yeah.
Called it.
Yeah. Are you omniscient? Do you know the future?
Just when it comes to soccer related things.
Yeah. I'll call
Oh,
it
I'm
whatever I
sorry,
want.
doubting Thomas. Just living in Canada, I just can't help but call it soccer.
I called it soccer first, to be fair.
True.
Yeah. What else? I could read some more comments, but is there anything? I guess we're supposed to wrap up now because
Yeah.
we're getting to the end of the stream.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover? Uh, I will mention that for those of you who are interested in my video, I also talk a lot about how I did that process that I mentioned maybe like an hour ago of rebuilding my life philosophy after leaving Islam. I go into it in a lot of detail, and I talk about what I believe today, what informs those beliefs, and how I navigate things like friendships with people from a Muslim or Arab background, and even just dating as an atheist. I talk about some of the worst dating experiences I had with people who come from a religious background, from Arab countries like me, and it's really hard. I found it really hard to do it, and I go into all sorts of detail with that in the video if you're interested.
Yeah, everyone check out that video, link in the description. And I haven't asked anyone to, leave a like yet, but do that on his video as well. Go watch it. That's an order. Even though I haven't watched it yet, I'm going to order you to go watch it. What else? Yeah, I guess to answer the question for people, why did I leave Islam? It's because there is no proof for Islam and I don't believe in it. That's why I left. How did I have a life with Islam? How did I gradually feel more confident in my decision to leave, or in my realization that I don't believe? That is a story that I tell through all of my videos, and I focus on parts of it in every, in any particular video. So I hope that answers that. And I don't want anyone to feel pressured to give justification for why they left Islam. Um, your reason could be, some people are, some people don't even consider themselves ex-Muslim because they never really consented to be Muslim to begin with, or never really practiced or felt the belief, and they feel like maybe the label doesn't apply to them. You choose whatever label applies to you, but there's no need to even justify that. I used to be a good follower of the religion, so I am valid in my reasons to leave. I know all the facts about the religion, therefore I should be allowed to leave. You can leave for as simple as a reason as, I don't want to follow it, and you're valid. So that's just a general reminder to everyone. That being said, I don't like it when all of what we say, all of our observations, all of our, some people say reasons, all of our thoughts about it are just ridiculed and reduced to because they want to sin or something that silly. That's not unique to Muslims that do that. And I guess in the sense that kind of shows people that other religions, other high control groups do the same thing. So It's a common tactic. It's not just Islam, so don't fall for it, is what
No,
I'm trying to say.
I definitely did not leave Islam for alcohol or casual sex or bacon or casual sex. Did I say that twice? Nope, that was not me.
Yeah. And you could do all these things and continue to be a Muslim
Yeah,
and get
I
away
know
with it.
Muslims who do all those things.
So do I. Um, yeah, it's funny. I met a Muslim who thought that I told her that I help people who left Islam, and she assumed that I meant help them return to Islam, which was a funny misunderstanding. I guess some of them might return to Islam, but most people that I help them be reassured in their decision, whichever way they want to go. And most of them end up not returning to Islam. But yeah, it's everyone sees their religion differently, but we just do our part, I guess.
Yeah.
Uh, you happy about the live stream today? Did we cover everything we wanted to cover?
Always more to cover, honestly, but yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good to. The one thing I'll say is I think it was really beneficial for me to have some time, some years between the experiences I talked about and doing the video, because you just have that perspective, and I think it helps to see things more clearly than when you're closer to being in the midst of it. And I honestly would recommend to every ex-Muslim, not saying to record a video and post it on YouTube, but to even just like write something or record something for yourself to, just channel and process your own feelings for yourself.
Yeah. Even writing it down,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
somewhere.
Whatever works. If you prefer, I know some people prefer just recording something to like a voice message to themselves.
Mm,
Yeah, that works as well. Whatever works best.
yeah. And I know that it's something that I've been reminded of in the last few days is that as a believer or as a Muslim, you have constant reassurance that what you're doing is the right thing or the way that you believe is the right way, or just by virtue of the words that people use every day, Alhamdulillah, Inshallah, Assalamu alaikum, and just attending prayer, listening to a lecture, all of that is positive reassurance that you're on the right track. But when you doubt, when you don't believe, when you deviate from the path, you don't have any reassurance most of the time. You don't have conversations with other people like you where you are just, patting each other on the back about how
Yeah.
good you are about your disbelief. But, believers do that all the time. So remind yourself, if you're feeling anxious, that how come I feel like I'm the only person, or I'm doing something wrong. It's because all the reminders in your life are pulling you in the other direction, and you don't have any equivalent for it, as an ex-believer. So ground yourself, talk to other ex-believers, remind yourself that you're not alone. If you need a ritual to replace your previous rituals, go for it. If that's something that you need. So yeah, it's understandable to feel that you need reassurance, and it's not fair for yourself to have that reassurance your whole life and then lose it and expect to be just fine without it. So reassure yourself and find other people who reassure you. And I guess that's all I want to say today.
Very eloquent as always. One thing I'll mention
Stalking you.
is one ritual that I started doing just this past December. Instead of celebrating Christmas or Eid, I decided to celebrate winter solstice, which is December 21st. And it marks the point when the days stop getting shorter and start getting longer. When you're living in a country like me, like Canada, where the sun sets at 4:30 p.m., that's something to celebrate, the days starting to get longer. And I think that's something more worthwhile of celebrating than anything in those religions, Christianity or Islam.
See, the challenge is to get other people to celebrate it with you. Otherwise, it doesn't
You're
mean
just this
anything.
crazy person who's celebrating it by themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, or just like that's the Seinfeld thing, where if any of you are fans, where George's father tries to celebrate Festivus. I think that instead of a tree, it's like a steel pole or something. I might be misremembering that, but hard to get other people to adopt new traditions. That's one of the reasons why religions are so sticky and how they linger for millennia.
Right. They ask people why they celebrate Christmas. They say, "هذا ما وجدنا عليه آباءنا." This is what we found our parents celebrating. So, yeah. Um, Yeah, celebrate solstice, everyone, along with Secular Spirit. And thank you for joining us. Check out his channel. Leave a like, leave a comment, all that good stuff. Thank you to, by the way, the patrons, YouTube members, and donors in the community for helping me get to where I am today, for building this community up together. Some names will be here. I will be updating them soon. I'm sorry if your name is not on there. Just send me a DM. I will add it. Thank you, everyone. And as always, think critically and think for yourself. And consider watching one of these videos next. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.